Hey, so I recently made a video about my favorite DPP teams of all time from 2009 through 2020, and I was getting ready to make the follow-up video, my favorite advanced teams of all time, when I had a realization. Now, forgive me for being more than a little soppy and sentimental here, but these teams are very close to my heart. And by cramming them all into one long video, I am not able to give them the detailed spotlight and attention that I would like to. So I decided to make this series because, as I said in the DPP video, I love team building, and this is a way to show the teams that have been special to me. So let's get right into things. This is a team from the Stone Age, September 2012. So being from the Stone Age means that while Pokemon Showdown did exist back then, it only had Gen 5. So every single Smogon tournament match, including Gen 5 at that time, was played on this archaic program called Pokemon Online. PO had their own sorts of replays, but the replay files I have of this team are long gone, and the only alternative is text logs, and even those are hard to dig up. So there's not much in the way of visual stimulation for this video. My apologies, but treat it like a podcast, like I'm sure most people do with most of my videos when I go on a 3.5-hour rant, which hopefully this won't be. Alright, so some context, some settings, some history, because I can go over the Pokemon or I can make things interesting. So I started playing Advance in 2011, early 2011, which was when Smogon moved from Shoddy Battle, the simulator of choice in Generation 4, to Pokemon Online for the 5th generation. So during the Gen 4 years, when it was played on Shoddy Battle, then Smogon Tour was OU, UU, and Ubers, because Shoddy only supported Gen 4, and therefore you were not going to have Advance and GSC in the Tour, because Smogon Tour started as a tournament of the 3 OU gens. It started in Advance, so it was RBY, GSC, and Advance, and that was easy because all of those generations were on the same simulator. So once Diamond and Pearl came out, and Smogon Tour shifted to include OU, UU, Ubers, because they didn't want people bouncing around on simulators or something. That's just my assumption. But that was the case. So then Gen 5 comes out, and Pokemon Online comes out. And it's got generations 4, 5, and also 3. And 2 came out, and then 1 came out later and later. But at the time, then it had 3, 4, and 5. So in early 2011, when it came time to be Smogon Tour season again, then Smogon shifted back to the Tour format, shifted back to the three most recent generations of OU, and thus I, a Gen 4 player who was playing Gen 5 and also Gen 4 at the time, was forced to play Advance if I wanted to compete in the Tour, which I wanted to. Incidentally, that format of Tour, the Gen 3, 4, 5 format, is where I partially helped make my name and why I'm mostly known for those 3 gens. But, and this team actually was partially responsible for helping me get to that point at the beginning. So, beginning of Advance in Season 11 in early 2011, then I don't really know what I'm doing. I see Pokemon I recognize like Tyranitar and Swampert and Salamence, which was not broken in Gen 3 like it was in Gen 4, and other guys like Skarmory, and then I'm seeing Pokemon I'm not so familiar with, like Dugtrio, who was a rare sight in DPP at the time. And I saw other Pokemon like Celebi and Jirachi too, and but some of the sets were weird. There's lots of HP bugs. Celebi runs Calm Mind and Leech Seed on the same set. What is that? And stuff like that. So I didn't really get what I was doing, and I wasn't really able to throw together a team. I tried, but I was not successful at all. So, and most of them were just pedestrian attempts to, have one advanced team that I could coast through everything with. Obviously, that's not how you play advanced, but I was new, and I've never been good at learning new metagames. So it was going to take some time. And, I grudgingly just only played advanced in the tours because I had to if I wanted to qualify for Smoking Tour, and I really just wanted to play Gen 4 and some Gen 5. I didn't really embrace Gen 5 that much. I was too comfortable with 4. Anyway, so Gen 3 at the time, this was before Fori and Pursuit Tyranitar became everywhere, or became used everywhere, sorry. So you had a lot of Superman clones at the time, and then Jabba's Calm Mind teams, and then the Fortress Pursuit Tar teams came around, and I was just using random stuff I found. I was never really on top of the metagame. The closest I came to that was in one Smogon Tour, where I won round 1, so I was like, oh nice, I never win in round 1. Actually, I think the second tour I joined, I made round 4, which I was really hyped about, and then, never again. But yeah, then that same season, season 11, then in like the last week of Advanced, then I played Georgie, aka Floppy at the time, and he SD passed with his Celebi to Agility Metagross and just wiped the floor with me. And I was like, how does anyone beat that? That's unbeatable, because I was new. So I decided to make that my main Advanced team. And yeah, and then and then how did that? Yes, yeah, okay, I'm remembering now. Not using a script is nice because it saves me time and makes things more natural, but it also means I have to collect my thoughts sometimes. Anyway, so in the fall of 2011, then the next season of Smogon Tour rolled around, so more advanced, and a user named Shrapnel with a 3 instead of an E, who was an old Net Battle era advanced player, posted a team with CB Metagross and Cloyster. And I decided, you know what, this team looks awesome. I'm going to try this in Smogon Tour. And then I think I made the semifinals of an advanced tour that season, mostly using that team. I think I switched to the SD Pass Celebi team once, but overall that team was really great. It was CB Gross, Cloyster, Swampert, Zapdos, Snorlax, and Gengar. So I really liked that team, and that helped me realize that, hey, advanced, I can actually learn this metagame. I don't have to just not learn it and just try to spam a team to get cheap points, and like with the SD Pass team, where I used to Sludge Bomb Metagross. Good God. Anyway, so then the following, a couple months later, then I ended up in SPL, and on my team was Majin Tupac Z, who for a long time was considered the best advanced player of all time. You gotta respect him, even if you weren't around in his day. He was an absolute monster, so I was picking up things passively from him, as well as seeing stuff like Endeavor Swampert, which wasn't really a thing in 2011, but started to pop up with some frequency in that year. I remember guys like Floppy, or Georgie rather, were using it. So I was still mostly struggling and not doing too well in advance, but then over the summer of 2012, then a bunch of old advanced vets came out and posted some old teams, like G80/Gene and Loki, and not just their teams, but teams from other guys like Vil and Goofball and Husk. So, and one of Loki's teams that he posted with CB Gross and Cloyster reminded me of Shrapnel's team. So I was like, hey, cool. So, am I ever going to get to the point? Yeah, all that has been to say that I was, from those teams that were posted, I was learning more and more about Advance and how the game worked, and from seeing the modern scene, I followed all the Advanced SPL games I was online to see, because games weren't public back then, so you had to see a game live or get the log from someone. So I was picking up that, I had some great advanced players on my team, mainly Majin. So I was, passively soaking things up. And I didn't do very well at all in Season 13 of Smogon Tour. But Season 14 came around, and I was like, all right, you know what, let me try this. Where most people would have just copied Jabba's Calm Mind team or one of the Fortress Pursuit Tar teams that were flying around. I don't know why I didn't. Lack of resources, because I wasn't really in with any big crowds of the day, and it was a lot harder to get those kinds of teams back then. They weren't as widespread. So I was insistent on doing things my own way, which now I'm thankful for. I was forced to fail in my own way a lot. So, before I tried to make like various SD pass, whatever, but this I consider the first real advanced team I made, because before it was just mostly junk. Unforgettable junk at that. No, the most memorable things about my SD pass attempts were the Sludge Bomb Metagross, because it hits Celebi. If I ever faced a Ludicolo, I would have been just fine, but no. Yeah. So, it's, I think, like, very end of August, early September of 2012, and I finally have a real idea. Like, a unique idea. So, my idea is, hey, well, Endeavor Swampert is awesome, right? He's fast, he brings things down to low HP, Sand finishes him off. So, that's already done. With Spikes, of course, it becomes a lot more dangerous. And that's something else I should mention. I mentioned using SD Pass a lot, but for the most part, if it was not SD Pass, which I saw as like an automatic win, quote unquote, then I thought I just had to use Spikes, because coming from Gen 4 and 5, where you need Stealth Rock on every single team, I was like, how do I do damage without hazards? It's easy. It does the work for me. Of course, Spikes are really strong, but a good advanced player has to be able to not have to use them. So, but, we're still getting there. So I decided Spikes alongside Endeavor, Pert, and Sand. Hey, how bad could it be? And I decided to use Cloyster precisely because of that Shrapnel team that I liked so much. Not getting trapped by Magneton was awesome. I remember Shrapnel's RMT said, easiest Spiker to use by far, what with all the Swamperts to set up on and Magnetons to not get trapped by. And Loki said something similar when he posted his team that also stuck with me, just like the Shrapnel team. And that Cloyster is great because he made it at a period in advance where there were a lot of trap teams with Magneton and Dugtrio, and Cloyster puts the clamps on those teams. Not literally because it's not RBY, but that was the idea. So that's why I decided to use Cloyster as my Spiker. And Spin, of course, is nice with Pursuit Tar, which was all the rage back then. So, I mean, not that it isn't now, but it was like a new thing. Everyone was like, oh, Advanced, this old dead metagame, and then it develops from being in Smogon Tour. So, anyway, so that wasn't the idea of my team was not Spin, Cloyster plus Pursuit Tar. I also like that Cloyster could actually hit Fortress, which was also everywhere. But the idea was that I would set up Spikes, and then I would Endeavor stuff with Sandstorm. The Sandstorm part is very important. With Swampert, and then I would have 2 394 speed Pokemon to clean up the endgame. Now, Aerodactyl, of course, has been spammed in advance, but Jolteon was not used ever. I mean, I know my history, and Jolteon was not used at all in advance. I realize I'm putting a lot of emphasis on it, like, hey guys, this is a big deal. I invented Jolteon, so apologies for that. But I want to stress that this wasn't something that was rarely used or outside of one guy or something. No, Jolteon was never, ever, ever, ever used back then. And, when I mentioned it to old players whose opinion I was asking them, they were like, just use Zapdos if you want to pass subs or agilities. So, as an offensive threat, Jolteon was just not taken so seriously. And, of course, something as naturally frail as Jolteon is not used defensively. Or so they thought. Now, nowadays, Jolteon Spikes is its own archetype. And I'm very proud of that. But, so now we know that Jolteon is both an offensive threat and an important defensive pivot. But, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. So, that was the basic idea. Sometimes when people ask me how do I build teams, then I get a little too abstract, and I say, I find what I want the team to do, and then I figure out the best way to do it. And, to me, that makes perfect sense. And then, someone I'm talking to is like, all right, well, what does that mean in concrete terms? So, let's say what I wanted my team to do was I wanted to abuse Endeavor Swampert with Spikes and Sand, and then I wanted a fast cleanup. So I took the 2 fastest Pokemon in the tier, Jolteon and Arrow. So that was the general idea. Spikes, easy way to weaken things with Endeavor, because Endeavor Swampert is very good at doing that, bringing things down to low HP. And then have a fast cleanup because there's no Choice Scarf in advance. So uh, that was the basic. I guess you could see some Gen 4 influence in that. But yeah, so that was the basic idea. And then I added, so I have Subpass Jolteon, because I thought that was just the standard Jolteon set. And in a way, I guess it was, because Jolteon wasn't getting used, so there weren't, standards to contend with. And I decided to use Calm Mind past Celebi. Honestly, I don't remember why. I just remember thinking Celebi was really good. Oh, no, now I'm remembering parts of why. So at the beginning of when I was first getting into Advanced, and I was like, oh my god, Celebi is so good. You literally can't switch into Leech Seed without your own Celebi. So I loved spamming Celebi because it meant that I would always have a Leech Seed switch in. So, limited thinking, but this was not a weird thought at the time that you had to use Celebi, because at the time Celebi was considered a top 3 Pokemon in Advance alongside Suicune and Tyranitar. So how times have changed, right? But it was just that good, and there were even some people who were like, from my experiences in Smoke and Tour, if your team didn't have Celebi, it wasn't a good team. So I just put it on there. I mean, the automatic thing with Spikes is Gengar to spin block, but I was like, you know what, I'll be fine because I can spin, and I'll have my own, and I have Explosion, and Cloyster deals with Fortress pretty nicely, so I can handle it. So I decided to Celebi, and I decided to Baton Pass because I figured it would make a nice combination with Jolteon. So the team's early days, I remember just using it in tests and various Smoke and Tour games. And in the regular season of Smoke and Tour 14, it had very limited success. I think the best I ever did was get to round 4 again. So at this point, my Advanced Live Tour success is round 4, lose round 1 a bunch of times until I reach round 2 and lose. And then season 12 was reach semis once and then fail a bunch more times. And season 13 was just a disaster that I don't remember at all. But season 14, round 4 once, and the rest is also just disastrous. But I remember liking the team and constantly tweaking it. So from my early test games, I remember I was able to get the sub pass to Celebi, then Calm Mind, and then like the subs. Not only does Jolteon obviously like a Calm Mind pass to it, but that it can sub and pass super beefed up subs. And I was having some games against like certain Blissey and Swampert teams where I would get this like little pass back and forth going. And of course, passing a Calm Mind to Swampert is a really nice thing to have, because then its Hydros and Ice Beams hit a lot harder. As an aside, I still think Surf on Endeavor Swampert sucks almost 8 years later. So, yeah, so that was the general idea. And nowadays, the standard Jolteon runs stuff like Thunder Wave, and for a while it ran Roar because Raikou was still a prominent metagame threat and Jolteon checked it. That was part of its defensive niche. But at the time I was just like Subpass, because, Subpassing Electric, that's strong, and I can abuse Calm Minds more easily this way. So, we're testing it out, and Endeavor Swampert was nice, but as it turns out, the team was insanely frail. I mean, not insanely, but, it needed help against Tyranitar and stuff. Also, don't ask me what these Cloyster EVs are for. I mean, the speed is obviously to creep on Skarmory. Not very much, either. And the defense is some bonus point that never, ever helped. And I just thought, oh, Cloyster has bad special defense, so I shouldn't invest in that, and instead special attack to hurt Fortress more. Again, not a good idea at all, but that was what I used back then. I did scour through archives until I was able to stumble across this spread. Obviously, I would not use this again. More SPDF. Fast Cloyster is still a new kind of thing, with guys like UD and Linear advocating that sort of deal, and I think Asta as well. Anyway, so Endeavor Swampert, I realized it's got to change. This cannot go on. I need not just the rocks, T-Tar and Arrow, but DD Salamence as well. So I was able to find the spread I used back then. This is also the spread I used back then on Celebi. So, because 300 beats Adamant CB Ments, and the rest can go in defense. That was a general rule. 270 for Heracross, 300 if you're beating Ments that are max speed. You know, simpler back then. No frigging Moltres to force me to run 308. Yeah, so I switched to this set. Now, the standard back then was a Hydro Pump or Surf in the last slot, usually Hydro, because you're actually trying to hurt Skarm and threaten torrent kills on T-Tar. But I decided to run Toxic just because I never liked the Water Stab. And actually back then, I took this thing from DPP where I... Did I run 224-32? No, I don't think so. Yeah, no, I definitely ran this. And I took Roar because I played DPP and I was like, well, it has to be good here, right? Curse-Lax and stuff, and turns out Roar was really good. But that's not on this team. That's on part 2 of Jolteon Spikes, the origin birth story. Yeah, because there is a part 2 to this. But it's a different team, so. Anyway, so I switched over to this set. Toxic, I just thought was good at the time for waters, mainly Milotic and, you know, other Swampert. You know, Toxic's always good. So I went with it. And I remember Tama's and Halloween's Pursuit Tar 4E team. Then that also used Toxic Pert at the time just to have the T in TSS. For those who are unaware, then TSS stands for Toxic Sand Spikes, and that's how Advance in the olden days shifted from, you know, sandless PP stall with pressure teams into more aggressive teams that abused Sandstorm and finished off with stuff like Arrow. Veteran Loves Superman is the most famous example. So, yeah, so Toxic, and I was like, yeah, I'll use Toxic, that's good. And T-Tar, I don't know why I used this set in particular. I think Fire Blast for 4 HP Grass and Pursuit. Because back then, Gengar was not running a lot of Spadef and would run, so you didn't really need Crunch. And I also liked Roar on T-Tar because it let me check Curse-Lax. And I was very paranoid about Curse-Lax back then. It was in a lot better place. It was in a better place in the metagame, so Roar at least somewhere helps because I don't have Leech Seed on this Celebi. So a lot of the time I would, you know, spike 3 times against a Cursing Lax with Cloyster, and then go to T-Tar and roar it out and deal with it later. And that generally tended to work. I would probably, I don't know why I didn't go double roar. That probably would have been nice, but I'm sure, you know, I'm arguing with my 16-year-old self. Now, quick aside, you know, sometimes you think, oh man, I was so bad back then. Everyone was so bad back then. And yeah, I used to think that too. And then I go back and I read some old logs and I'm like, you know what, 16-year-old me, I should not give you crap like that. You knew... I mean, I'm not saying that 16-year-old me was a genius and that I'm never going to regain that form. But I gotta say, 16-year-old me was smarter than I remember him for sometimes. So, you know, I'll give him credit for Toxic. Yeah, don't you change cells enough to be an entirely different person every 9 years? So that means in, let's say... If we're going from 2012, then in a year and a couple months, then I will no longer be that person. No, I'll always be 16. At least a little bit. Anyway, so I shifted to Defensive Swampert. And that worked a lot better. And, yeah, this was the variation of the team that I remember the most. So, you know, we're getting through Smogon Tour regular season, and my Gen 3 is really nothing to write home about. You know, getting to round 4... was pretty nice, and the team was, you know, pretty okay. I'm gonna attribute it more to my misunderstanding of how to play Advance as opposed to the team's missteps. But then Smogon Tour playoffs come around, and I make playoffs for the first time, and I'm like, well, what else would I use besides my trusty team, right? So my round 1 game is against Blue, who was... So this is, you know, the juicy part. So my round 1 game is against Blue, who at the time is like a top 2 tournament player, you know, top 5 at absolute worst at that point. And so I'm just going in with my usual stuff, and I don't remember the game exactly, but I remember the Spark Notes. So I think he was using McMegan's Trap Team, because I know he had the Mag Trio combo and Curse-Lax. As a matter of fact, that example of Cloyster spiking on a boosting Curslax, that happened to me quite a bit, but it happened against blue as well, and thank God for my Roar Tyranitar. So, yeah, I remember that, and he was using, so, Magtrio, Curslax. I remember he had a Spadev Zapdos, which is what makes me realize that it was McMegan's team. So, there was almost certainly a Celebi and a Milotic there as well, if I'm remembering McMegan's old team correctly, which I'm pretty sure I am. So, that was the team, and I don't remember much beyond that. Yeah, and around this time, now I was still, happy with the team as a whole, but I realized that Arrow was kind of on the expendable side, which, I thought was weird, and departed from the team's original idea, but then again, so did the switch to defensive Swampert. So, for Arrow, and I think I made this change in the blue game already, actually. I'm not sure. Then I switched over to 4-attack Gengar, because I always thought it was a shame that Fire Punch didn't get used, and it had some great coverage. Metagross, Heracross, Jirachi, Magneton. So I used that, and the Gengar didn't actually end up doing anything in the game. I think so, anyway. I just remember using it. So, yeah, I don't remember much else about the game either, other than that Cloyster, him having a Zapdos, or her, and, because Blue is actually a girl. So, yeah, Cloyster spiked on the boosting Curslax, and then T-Tar roared it out, and I really don't remember much else. So, sorry about that, but it won, and I was like, wow, so it wins when it matters. So I was doing more tweaking. So this eventually became 4-attack Gengar. Please don't ask me to find the EVs because I really don't remember them. And I might have even gone with Modest, honestly. I did like running Modest Gengar at the time, which CBB was doing a lot of. But let's just assume I ran something like this. And if not, then you could just tweak the nature to Modest. So I was playing around with more sets, and I was testing a lot with my buddy Ace Matador. And he was testing out this this horrible Gengar set. Horrible in the sense that it was the absolute worst to play against. And I've got a case of the hiccups, excuse me. So, I don't remember the EVs at all, other than, these guys won in bulk, so let's just split them somewhere. I'm pretty sure it wasn't actually 2489696, but it's nice to pretend that it was. I'm pretty sure I was like Salamence, Bulk, and Respidef, but who knows. So we're just going to pretend like this. And this set was Hypnosis, Mean Look, Perish Song, Protect. So you can already see how utterly dirty this is. And it was seen as cheap by many. And I was just messing around with it because I was like, you know what? I'm sick of this stupid set owning me. I'm going to try it myself. I don't condone the use of this set now because it's luck-based and not good, but I figured I can make this work. So my round 2 opponent is, there goes the siren, is Heist, or the Grand Babito, or Babidi 1998, as some of you newer players might know him as. But back then he was Heist, and he was also an incredibly fearsome opponent in Gen 4 and 5. Gen 3, I knew that, while he had more experience and he was better than me, then I was, if I just did my thing with this team I was so familiar with, then I would be okay. And now this game I remember extremely well. So I was running this Gengar set, and the rest I think was mostly the same. So his team was Earthworm's team at the time. It was CB Salamence, HP Grass Metagross with a little defense EVs to help against Dugtrio, 4-attack Snorlax, Magneton, Claydol, and Vaporeon. So Earthworm was running a very offensive form of Magdoll before Magdoll was really a thing. Years before, in fact. So, so here's what I remember. I remember that his HP Grass Metagross was really, really, really scary. Because, I have Swampert and then some non-checks. I remember that my Gengar pulled off... his Magneton was Rest Talk, which Earthworm used to ward off Will-O-Wisp Gengar. because back then rest talk was actually good because sleep talk did not force you to. You didn't have that whole burn sleep turns before switching out, the thing that restricts sleep talk so greatly now. So rest talk was all over the place back then, usually on Zapdos, but Magneton was a good user of it. So, and I believe that's how my Gengar beat it. And I remember I was getting some good luck with Hypnosis, and then I remember I got a bit of not so good luck. So it was, I don't know if it evened out or something, but I definitely wasn't just hexing him in a one-sided affair. It was a very tight battle. And I remember I got my Jolteon Celebi combo going. I passed with a calm-minded Jolteon. I subbed up. Oh, and then I did get some more luck, though. Then I think he matched it. I don't remember if I'm just trying to rationalize it so it doesn't sound so bad. But I do remember that it wasn't completely one-sided. I remember there was some notable stuff as well. So I already... Cloyster was showing its worth in that it did not care about Claydol at all, and that's one of the great things Cloyster does even now. So I was going to maintain spikes against a Magneton Claydol team, and part of why Earthworm's team was so fearsome, why McMegan spammed it a lot in that season of Tour, as I remember, is that he never had to deal with spikes because the spiker would get trapped and then Claydol would spin without having to worry about the Gengar that was on everyone's team. So when Cloyster shows up, then it really puts the clamps on that. You know, a very early example of that happening, of that matchup happening. Probably the first time it was happening in an advanced tournament, honestly, like an official advanced tournament. So a little bit of history. Anyway, so then I pass a Calm Mind to my Celebi. My Celebi passes a Calm Mind to my Jolteon, and I sub up as he goes to Claydol, and I crit him with Hidden Power from full. Now, yeah, I would have lost the sub. Jolteon ended up getting forced out by Snorlax or something, I think. Again, it's been a long, long time. And I think that Snorlax actually crit something. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember, but point being that that helped out. But it was the Celebi Jolteon combo at work again, because still +1/+1 Jolteon behind a sub to a KOing Claydol. That's pretty freaking nasty. So I guess I don't remember the exact. I remember more details than the blue game. That's for sure. I remember. So that was important, and so it was a really tight game, and it came down to his HP Grass Metagross against my Swampert, and thank God for those Spadef EVs, because I think it either took 2 or it protected out of range of 1. But either way, then with spamming Protect, then it ended up as a 1-0 with Swampert surviving Metagross's last HP Grass and Earthquaking it. So I remember that. Yeah, I don't remember much else, but Snorlax was annoying. I remember fending it off and barely. Gengar went in. There's luck on both sides, but I mostly just remember my own at this point. And it was incredibly close. Thank God for Spadef EVs on Swampert. So, and HP Grass Metagross just came up barely short. So, thank God for that. And that was really tight. So, now the team was 2-0 in Tour playoffs against 2 of the best players ever. So, then semifinals. Obviously, this was not just an advanced tournament, but I'm only focusing on the advanced portions of the tournament. That I was facing Vince 2612, who was also a really fearsome player who had beaten CL and Undisputed to get to that point. So, no slouch. And I didn't really know anything about him in advance other than just, I don't know, I'm just going to bring my same team again. But I was changing things again. Now, I was laddering a lot with this team just because I wanted practice, and the ladder wasn't great, but every once in a while I would play an actual advanced player, or someone using a real team at least, and I would take something from it. So what I took from this was that I was struggling a little bit against Scar and Bliss. I would be able to, find a way, but it was definitely tough. And I realized that last slot, that 6th slot, was where I could go to help out in that department. So, I could have tweaked my Gengar set more, but I liked the idea of Metagross, specifically because it could mess up Scar and Bliss without relying on Explosion. So, I am almost certain I used Thunder Punch HP Grass. I don't remember the set at all. Obviously I had HP Grass. Well, did I obviously have HP Grass? I'm pretty sure this was before HP Fire Metagross was, a popular set. So I think it was T-Punch HP Grass. I'm almost certain. So I don't know what I used in the last slot. I mean, nowadays I would use Earthquake like the Asta set, but I probably just used Meteor Mash, honestly. So I'm going to guess that. And God, I really can't remember my EVs, and I couldn't find... Because I could find the original Arrow version of the team in my old archives and PMs, but I couldn't find the Metagross one. Maybe it's still out there, but yeah, this is what I ran, I'm pretty sure. And EVs, I just remember that I was slow, probably quiet, because I remember in the game against Vince, then he had a Metagross, and I was like, man, it sucks that I know I'm going to be slower. Although, if I didn't have Earthquake, who knows? Maybe I didn't have Explosion, honestly. I just didn't value Explosion as high. Honestly, that might have been it. Because I don't think I was going to value that, oh man, my meta is slower than his meta as highly if I couldn't Earthquake it. Because I'm pretty sure that was an Earthquake war. And I don't think I was going without Mash. Who knows? So... HP Grass, T-Punch, and then 2 of EQ Mash, boom. Yeah, so that game, I don't remember much of the details, other than that Metagross war. But I remember he had a very offensive team with Salamence and Metagross and Snorlax. And I played pretty well through most of it. And then I remember at the end, then I was able to... I remember Jolteon got a sub up as I scared Mence out, maybe, and then I 2-hit KO'd Snorlax. Yeah, okay. I'm pretty sure it was, I had Jolteon against Mence and Lax. It wasn't my last, Jolteon wasn't my last Pokemon, or else I would lose that, but he needed his Mence, I think. So, and I didn't want to predict between HP Ice and Thunderbolt, because if I HP Ice the Snorlax, then he stays alive, but if I Thunderbolt, then he lives the next Thunderbolt and takes me out, and then I lose. But if I Thunderbolt the Mence, then I also lose. So sub was a way of, was the interim. I don't think I had revealed it prior, so I got to sub to see if Mence was going to stay in and, EQ or DD. Because, worst case, best case he goes to Snorlax and I T-Bolt 2 a KO it and win. Worst case, then, I get to sub a few more times. And... have more shots at it, have him mess up more. Give him more opportunities to mess up, or give myself another opportunity to surprise him with HPIs as he thinks I'm going to sub. So, yeah, I remember that ending very clearly. And that was about it. That's about it. And so Jolteon won the game. And then I didn't use the team in finals, which was, I actually brought that was a different thing. And it was good because McMegan brought a bulky Starmie. So, yeah. That's about it. That's the history of this team. So, as far as metagame impact, that is reserved for part 2 of the original Jolteon Spike story. But this is a part of history still in that fall into December of 2012, because no one else was using Jolteon. Jolteon Spikes was not a common style of team. And it proved that in high-level play that Jolteon was legit, and it taught me a lot about the metagame, but in term as well, so I like that. But in terms of metagame history, then this was, I'm sure some people use Jolteon, for passing subs to offensive pokes back on Net Battle, but it was never a metagame force. So as far as metagame being legitimate, not many people copied this team or anything. I gave it to a few friends, but I don't think anything much came of it. So, but at the same time, then this is where Jolteon Spikes, or I learned that Jolteon Spikes was legit, and so this was the first time it was used, and that would set the building blocks for Jolteon to become a more legitimate part of the future metagame. Because, I wasn't a very influential... I take that back. I was not an influential advanced player at all back then. God, that was such a full of my self-statement. I'm sorry, but no one was gonna copy the team I was using, just because I used it. Whereas that's happened more in recent years. But this was, again, I can't speak highly enough about Jolteon because it was such a big deal for me to leave a mark on Advance, which was like this tier of ancient legends. So that's why I am very territorial about it. So yeah, that was so this was the final product. Before I pretty much retired it after this. Yeah, I remember really wanting that Metagross because I was facing a Toxic Whirlwind Skarmory. This was, before Toxic Spit F Skarmory was the standard back in that fall of 2012. But I mean, it was starting to, get out there. So I was like, yeah, I need some measures against this. So yeah, Jolteon was really good and carried me when I needed it most. And this was where history would be made, where Jolteon first was seen on the big stage, proving that it was not just some gimmicky Pokemon to be forgotten about and, forever living in Zapdos' shadow. So yeah, this team did not influence the metagame much itself, but it's still a landmark of advanced history, and it would lay the groundwork for what was to follow. And I think Danilo actually, I think Danilo took some influence from this, but I'm not sure, because I remember he had like a physical offense Jolteon team, which was more in the vein of what I imagine it was used like on Net Battle, and I think he used a Smeargle Jolteon team, which I know he saw these games, so I'm 99.9% certain that he got the idea from there, because Jolteon was, again, never used. Did I mention that Jolteon was never used? Anyway, so there was that, and then and he also used Arrow with it. But we're going to leave that for the next time. Part 2 of Jolteon Spikes, the Jolteon Spikes story, written by a Jolteon Spikes user. Anyway, so we'll get more on this next time. So this has been my favorite teams, episode 1. My first advanced team, and the first Jolteon Spikes team in advance. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, that you took something from this. Short video by my standards. Anyway, yeah, we will continue on in the next episode. So, I will see you next time.